Today's objectives is to learn how rows, columns, and trees interact to become reports at an intermediate level. Starting with rows, if we look at format codes, they offer a selection of pre-formatted choices for the content of a row. Format codes cannot be added to rows with links to accounts. You can add total rows, a TOT, calculation rows, CAL. Total rows refer to row numbers. Cal rows need an @ sign in front of them to refer to rows, otherwise it's just a number. You can add formatting rows, left align, right align, centering. You can add a base row for calculations, such as percentage of sales. You can add column breaks. This is useful on a balance sheet. And you can add underlines, double underlines, single underlines. There's 5 different kinds of line that you can add to a row format, line 1 to line 5. You can put boxes around different rows, BXB to start and BXC to end. You can mark a row as a remark. Remark rows don't get printed. You can affect the sorting. You can sort in ascending order. You can sort in descending order. You can look at absolute values so that you can have negative and positive numbers mixed together. In the Link to Financial Dimensions column, you can link to Great Plains. You can use accounts and other segments. You can use account categories. You can use the first 2 user-defined fields on your account card. You can use the operator plus minus to add and subtract dimensions. If you have a row that's not a currency amount, you can override the format. You can choose to select a currency, a numeric, a percentage, or you can make your own custom format. Use the print control column to suppress rows. You can do this for various reasons, such as $0 rows, calculation rows, or if there's rows that have rounding. So let's switch over to Management Reporter and Great Plains for a moment, and we'll have a look at the rows in action. So here I have a row format that's pulling my sales accounts. My first row is an account range. I can drill into my account range to set it up. I'm going to drill into my segment, and I can use the ranges inside GP to pull the account numbers. The second row is an account category. So I'm using the out-of-box sales account category to pull the data. My third link is to reporting. Now reporting is my user-defined field 1 over in my Great Plains. So here's my account card with user-defined field 1 set as reporting and the value of sales. So I can see that value over in Management Reporter as well. My next row is where I've got my sales returns. And I've got that again. Here I've got my sales and my sales returns, and I've got my positive and my negative number so that I can deduct my sales returns from my sales. Or because sales are credits and my sales returns are going to be debits, what I should really be doing is adding them together. So sales and sales returns, and I'll leave the sales operator as a positive note. Then I'm going to do some math here. I've got a calculation row. And I'm going to take at row 264, which is up here, my sales returns discounts. I'm going to divide it by at 250, so I divide it by my sales. And I'm going to override the format, and I'm going to make this a custom format for different percentages. So we'll go ahead and generate this report. And we'll have a look at what the data looks like. My report is generated. You can see the first three sales lines all have the same amount. So I know my categories are set correctly on my accounts. I know my user-defined field is set correctly on my accounts. The next row shows the sales returns and discounts as the negative $100. So I know then that the first calculation I made is incorrect because the sales are actually going up. The second calculation I made is correct where the sales are going down. And you can see on the last row my format override for the percentage. Let's move to a different row format. This time we're going to start with a row that's left aligned, right aligned, and centered. I'm going to set my base row as row 980. And I've asked the system to sort row 200 to 290 based on whatever's in column D in the column format that's chosen. Below that, I've got my total row with an underline. I've got a calculation of at 980 divided by 10. So we know that this is only going to take my sales and divide it by 10. It's not going to use the row because I haven't put in the at sign. I have a column, so that I'm going to force the next set of data to move over to the right-hand side. I've got two remark columns so that I know that these aren't going to print. I've got some boxes here starting, and inside my box I've got some lines. And then I've got my total for my data, and then the end of my box. So we're going to go ahead and generate this report, and we'll see what our data looks like. So our report is generated. Here's our sales left aligned, sales centered, and sales right aligned. Our data comes through. We have our underline and our total, and then the total divided by 10. We force the column to move the data over to the right side. So here we have the box around our discounts and our various different kinds of lines. When we look at the sorting options, we saw earlier that we added a sort onto column D. And column D, when we look at our column format, is a variance column. So what I want to do is have all the large variances move to the top of the report. So when I look at the report, because I'm looking at column D, I've got my $219,000 variance at the top, and it works its way down. So variance sorting can be an excellent way to draw someone's attention to large items that need to be reviewed. You could also change your sort so that it sorts alphabetically. You could have it sort by actual sales, budgeted sales, any field that you have inside your report. Moving to columns, when we look at the header, we can add auto text. We can add dates, fiscal year or calendar year. We can pull from Windows. We can pull from inside GP. We can add unit names from any trees that you have. We can add currencies if we want to split our data between different currencies. When we look at print controls, we can hide columns that are calculations. You can hide columns that are zeros for the entire column. Attribute columns can be extremely handy. They add further detail about transactions. You can add vendor or customer using the original master name. You can add invoice numbers using the originating document number. You can add things like exchange rate, series, transaction dates. It's an extremely useful thing to add when you're drilling down on data. You can add a reporting unit restriction to a column if you want to make that column show data from a specific company, a specific division, a department, or any of the segments that are in your GL that are pulling from a reporting tree. Moving to trees, trees are extremely handy for consolidation. You can promote and demote branches of the tree for consolidation. Trees do not have to include things that are in your GL. Say a city or a location is in your GL, you can add a province or state or a country to the tree without it being in the GL, just by knowing where that location is. You can add unit security to your trees. Unit security is a way to distribute a report to different people where the recipient can only see the levels of the tree that's applicable to them. This is good when a department or a regional manager should only see that department or that region. Trees can accommodate 10 additional lines of text. Each of these lines can be added to a report header or a report footer. This can be an exercise in creativity as to what to put inside these boxes. You could have the number of full-time employees, number of hogs in a hog barn because the hog barn is a division or a department. You could have the location of a division or department. You could even put things like, why did you use this project? It's being closed. Over on the Reports tab, you can print the report at the financial account, or financial account and transaction detail level. If you choose to run the report at the transaction level, remember that you can only drill on a month-to-date column to the transaction level. Year-to-date columns and calc columns cannot have the drill to the transaction level. Use the output and distribution page of the report to select the Excel options, such as if you want to include fonts and shading, include formulas when you export out to Excel. If you have headers and footers in your report, do you want those headers and footers to become actual headers and footers in the Excel document? The Headers and Footers tab is where you're going to see the additional text that comes off the reporting tree. You're going to select Auto Text, and then you're going to take text from your reporting tree. On the Report Settings tab, there's a lot of options. If you decide to do rounding, you may want to consider the processing order. You want to avoid a scenario where a 1.3 would round down to 1, and then the next line is 1.3 and it rounds down to 1. Then you have a total line, so 1.3 plus 1.3 is 2.6, but that rounds up to 3. So if you have a certain processing order, you could end up with 1 plus 1 equals 3, which is clearly not appropriate. From the Other button at the bottom of the settings window, you can access things like your page margins, your page orientation, and your paper size. After you generate your report, you can right-click on a row or a column and select that row or select that column, and then you will be able to add a chart to the data. So let's head back over to Management Reporter and have a look at how the columns and the trees and the charts all work together. So we'll start in our columns. We've got 3 header rows. We can add more if we want to. I'm going to double click in and I'm going to insert my auto text. I'm going to pull the month name, add a space. I'll pull my calendar year, and I'm going to underline this with dots, and I'm going to put this just on column B, and it's going to be centered. I'm going to look at my print controls. If I wanted to, I could say this is not a printing row, or I could suppress this column if it's all zeros. I'm going to look at my reporting unit. I can add any of my trees that I have, and I could say this is only going to print for Department 01, or this is going to print for Department 5 through 99, whatever I want to add. My column format already has an attribute column. In this case, it's pulling the originating transaction type. I'm going to add another attribute column. And this time I'm going to go and get my originating master record name. That's going to give me the vendor or the customer. I'm going to add another attribute, and I'm going to get the originating document number. That's going to give me the invoice number. Moving to the trees now, I can take my trees and I can insert rows, and I could say that this is now an @any for consolidation, and this is going to be my Manitoba. And I'm going to tell the system that anything with no department, I'm going to demote it underneath Manitoba, and I'm going to take anything with department 1 and call it Manitoba. And then I'm going to have another reporting unit, and it's another @any for consolidation, and this is rest of Canada. And then I'm going to take 2 through 99, and I'm going to demote those underneath the rest of Canada. So now I've added locational reporting without having that inside my GL. Moving across my tree, I'm going to see that I can have unit security. So anything with no department can only be seen by Victor. Anything with department 01 can only be seen by myself. Anything with department 2 can only be seen by Alexander. And then 3, 4, and 5 through 99 can be seen by anybody because the unit security is blank. Moving further across to my additional text, this is where we have the 10 lines of additional text that we can add onto the tree so that it can print onto the report. On the report itself, my detail level can be financial, financial and account, or financial account and transaction. Obviously, as you get more detail onto the report may take longer to generate. When you run a financial account and transaction report, you have to make sure that you have a month-to-date column, because a year-to-date column and a calculation column cannot drill past the account numbers. On the Output and Distribution tab, we have our checkboxes for fonts and shading, whether we want to include formulas, and if we want to include headers and footers. In the Headers and Footers tab, this is where we can come in and add our auto text so that we can pull the text from reporting tree 1 that we saw on our reporting tree. In our settings, we have our rounding, so if I round to whole dollars, I have to then consider, am I going to roll up the values from the tree, perform my calculations, then apply the rounding, or do I move the rounding up in the tree? Clicking on the Other tab button, I can then see my page setup where I have my margins, my page orientation, and the size of my paper. So let's go ahead and generate our report, and we'll see that we have all of the different elements that we added to our column and from our tree. So here's our report. You'll see that on Department 1, here's my note from my tree. Why did you use Department 1? It's closed. When I try to access Department 2, it says you can't because of unit security. There's no data past Department 3, so I can't see those. If I go back to Department number 1, I can right-click on my column. I'll select it. That's going to light up my graphs or my charts, and I'm going to put a pie chart on my variance.